Welcome to the Archive podcast, where we explore the arcs of our individual journeys and the strength of the hive that holds us together. I'm Amy Rost, and I believe that life isn't meant to be navigated alone. Here, we dive into conversations that bring us closer together to ourselves and to each other, and to the communities that lift us up. This is a space for real stories, honest reflections, and meaningful connection. Whether you're in a season of transition, seeking deeper relationships, or simply craving conversations that inspire growth, the Hive is for you. Because when we come together, we grow stronger. Welcome to the Archive. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. And today is a solo podcast, and it is something I want to dive into because I feel like there are so many of us in this season, um, and that we have so many questions, uncertainties, transitions that are happening. And so today we are really going to dive into one of my favorite topics, your arc, your journey, and remind us that it's still unfolding and trusting in the next chapter. Because I think there are many of you who are maybe feeling like I am as we enter into a new chapter and a new season. It's hard sometimes to just find that grounding and remind us, to trust in the process. So we are going to together acknowledge these moments when we feel like maybe we're on the brink of something new, with that shift, that change, a new chapter, without even know exactly what is coming next. And we're going to really talk about trusting that process and honoring the timing and remembering that our arc is still unfolding. So this one I think it's important. So living well in transition out when while life is unraveling or unfolding in front of us, I think, we need to talk about what it means to be in between, in the middle, shall you say. It could be in the messy, whatever that is. But we often, rush to like figure out what's the outcome. How do I influence the outcome? And how do I, you know, sometimes maybe avoid sitting in just what is becoming and unfolding. And I think that's really important. And it applies to so many things. It applies to, we talk about this even in movement. Sometimes we just have to feel the movement and not think about how do I make it perfect. I also think about that in, parenting or navigating life. How do we just be? How do we sit and maybe even just observe? And observe what's happening around me, but also that observation of going within. What comes up? And for me, what comes up in a time in observing, and as we get older, I feel like time just exponentially gets faster. I don't ever feel like, oh my gosh, time is going so slowly. um, and I feel like the older I get, the faster it goes. But for me, like, this has come up in this season that I'm in, is as a mom of four. Two of them have already left the house, and I've got two who are twins, who are, we're coming into that last, we're finishing up that grade 11 year and coming, preparing for that, one more year of school, and at home, really in that family unit, as it's been. And it's changing, and it has, me changing and questioning a lot of things. But what I had to do was, there's times where it gets overwhelming. There's so many things, like everybody's going a different direction. Everybody needs something different. Life is just busy. And there were some feelings and some thoughts that were creeping up like, oh, we only have one more year of this. What is that going to look like? You kind of like, well, you're in the season like, oh, I can't wait till I not have to do this. But then you think about there's going to be a day where you don't have to do this. And what is that going to feel like? So for me, I had to really like pause and sit quietly and really find that observation. Observing really, one, observing these children becoming adults, which is, kind of an interesting thing. Like in this life as a parent, you are the thing you love the most, you're preparing them to not need you, which is a little bit of an interesting concept. You spend, 18, 20 years parenting and preparing them to launch, and you're really preparing them to launch and then not need you, but hopefully want to still spend some time with you. And I think in that, thinking about, okay, they are going to, we've almost done our job here, my husband and I. We've almost raised all the kids. And, so far so good. All of them have, are launching into their next chapter and figuring it out for themselves. And they're, really amazing humans. And there is that part of like, when you stop to observe and say, hey, like here they are, they're growing. Here they are, they're making, they're having some exciting opportunities. They're going to make some choices around what that next phase is for them. And you really start to see them as, see them as they're shifting from childhood to adulthood. And not that they don't still need their parents. They still need their parents as guidance. And, hopefully that we've also, raised them that, we can come back together in a different way. And I do remember as a young mom, I read something, and it was, that our kids are really borrowed to us for a little while, and they're not ours to keep. And it goes back to that launch, right? They're not ours to keep. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I can't remember where I read that or who said that, but it sort of just sat with me for a very long time. And when I could again just stop and sort of be and observe, but the observation was what were the things that were coming up for me? As you're into this middle life, you're into this, where most of your life has been, work and all of the kid things and extracurricular things. What are those next things going to mean for me? And who am I outside of this? And I think this is common for women to ask these questions like, what am I going to do next? Um, and I think, again, in that moment of just being and allowing ourselves to be, it is not easy to be quiet in this. And there may be a lot of things that come up. But again, kind of like listening to what is coming up for you in this time. And so I think when we start to maybe shift and reframe this, because we could easily get down we can get down a rabbit hole in this of, so much unknown, and life really as we know it is going to change. But maybe we offer instead a reframe and saying, not knowing, it's still part of the knowing. And it's where that we have to leave our trust. That's where the trust lives. So not knowing is still part of that knowing, and it's where the trust lives. And any of us living a real life, there are going to be these seasons and transitions and next chapters for us at every stage of our lives. That's kind of the beautiful thing um, about life. And so if we shift from that in that own arc and like really starting to ask yourself those questions for what is it for you, I think we also have to dive into that individual journey, but also that journey of the hive, that journey of the community, and really the symbolism behind that. Your arc, that personal journey full of bends and pivots and transformation. The hive is that support system in your community, the wisdom and the stories we share that help us become who we're meant to be. And I think we can't actually have one without the other. And I hope that that has been part of what your takeaway from this podcast is really highlighting our own journey, but then that journey of that hive and that collective learning, that collective support of a community. And community isn't always going to just give us all the answers. But what it does, it reminds us that we're not alone in that journey, wherever we are, that there is someone who may be a little further ahead. There may be someone a little further behind us, just where we are in our in stages. And sharing the stories of how each have navigated a situation is where the opportunity to learn is, because we really start to hear pieces of someone else's story that resonate. And I always say, maybe the ingredients aren't the same, but there's elements of it that are highly relatable, highly relatable. And I say that, as I use the example of kids getting ready, I can feel this shift in the household and in their own growth watching it. But it could also be, is it, for those who aren't mamas, maybe it's, a shift out of a career that no longer, you're in love with, or you're ready for something different. And again, being in a community and creating a community, and I always say you have the power to create your own community. And your community may, and actually not may, it will evolve over time. The people that are in that inner circle, there's very few who are in it for life. And what I have learned as I get older is the importance not only of community, but the importance of who's in that inner circle. And, you know, I think like as when we're younger, family's a lot of that. And I see this even in my own kids as they're starting to form, relationships outside of the family and outside of the household, that they're forming their own little micro communities to support them and walk with them along the way. And we should never underestimate the power of that. That hive is what keeps us going, and really what um, walks with us, so that we don't feel like we're alone. And I think the beauty of being held and supported um, while life is unfolding is, again, that not feeling alone. And I want to come back, I want to circle back to this even on a bigger level, because I feel like where we are today, I think there is the highest rate of loneliness. And I see this on so many Facebook pages for moms and community Facebook pages of people who've moved to the area, and how difficult it is for them to make connections. And I think we have to honor that. We've been through really an unprecedented time, and that time has changed how we make connections. And I also think it has to, maybe push us to ask, if it's changed how we make connections, how do we have to show up to be an invitation to connection? you see how that is a little like not just how do we show up, make connections, how do we invite others into our space? And it doesn't have to be the inner circle, but it makes me really sad that so many people are walking the journey today feeling alone and not, not able to make the connections. There's not the same. I always say, like, when we were young, like we were, young parents, there were like mom and tots groups, and really there should be mom and teenagers groups, but I don't think we'd ever get the teenagers to go. But even, with so many working from home, the opportunity for connection is much harder. And for me, in my own space, in my own business, part of my mission has been like, how do we have an inviting space that invites connection and invites community? And I don't think we can take for granted that it just will happen. It doesn't. And I teach this a lot to, new teachers and new businesses opening, is it doesn't just happen. That you want to be really intentional about it, because it really is a powerful tool in your business. Um, and when you're creating an invitation, we have to also create the invitation without expectation. Create an invitation to come into our community and be part of our community and create connections. But the expectation isn't that everybody has to say yes. And the invitation isn't just one time. The other thing we've learned from, coming out of a pandemic and sort of in this next phase we're in, is that people sometimes need to see things many, many, many times before they actually say yes. And that can be super frustrating, but I think if we shift our own perspective, thinking, knowing that people are so bombarded by information all the time, that they are, you know, lonely and maybe afraid. But if we keep making an invitation that one day, whoever that person, whoever needs it, it will be right for them and it'll be right for them to say yes. So I think, that piece of creating community and being intentional about that community leads to really successful communities. Um, Whatever the size, that's the other thing. Your community doesn't need to be hundreds of people. Your community could be 5 really engaged people. And our communities are often bigger than we think they are. And maybe not all communities actually fill our buckets in all areas. Like my business community doesn't necessarily fill my family community. They're different, and that's okay. That's what they're meant to do. So it's really, looking at what does that mean for you. And really, this is where this podcast, it exists for this very reason. It is to hold space, create community as we grow together, having the conversations. Um, and I think then the next piece of this is really about trusting the process. Whew. This is like relinquishing control. And why, like, trusting yourself, honestly, is a practice. It is not something that for most of us will come easy. We have expectations, or we think we can control what the situation is. And I think, you know, learning to create a practice around trusting yourself is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. And it is something then that keeps giving back to those around you. So if we just allow ourselves to not trust the process, we are going to speak to the fear that comes up when we don't have that clear path. We are going to, whatever the season of transition or whatever it is in, if we just give the attention to the fear, we won't see that clear path forward. And I think when we start to share how we can cultivate some trust in the process, we start to see perhaps how maybe there are some small aligned actions that can build trust within ourselves one step at a time. And I really want you to think about this. I do this in coaching so much. Part of what the framework is on this is there's no action too small. So even if you're in a season of uncertainty and a season of change and transition and it comes up for you, what is one little action step? And it might be just honoring, like, oh, fear, I hear fear. I see you. Even that acknowledgement, that little acknowledgement starts to shift and creates an aligned action step that helps to build that trust within yourself. It's like, okay, I see you, fear. By the way, we all have fear. Fear comes up for everyone. And we've talked about this in previous episodes is what, back to, we talked about the stories we tell ourselves. Is it true? Is the fear true? Because most of the time, the story we tell ourselves in which fear shows up, it doesn't allow us to trust. It actually fills in a story that isn't true. And when we have that truth and that clarity being like, oh, I see you, fear. This is just fear. When we walk through that to the other side, it is not nearly as fearful or scary as we thought it was in our head. And that on the other side of that, we've trusted ourselves to be, I acknowledge the fear and I'm going to walk through it. Is that building that trust in yourself over time? And again, please hear there is no step that is too small. There's not one that's too small. They all count. So, whatever that is for you, acknowledge it, honor it, and take one little step forward to building that trust in yourself while you are moving through a transition. And I really also invite you all to lean into the softness of that. Like lean into that nurturing part of that for you rather than leaning into a hustle. I'm not saying create more and more and more and more action steps. I'm not actually adding to your to-do list. What I'm asking you is to lean into that softness of your soul. Lean into that piece of you where you're like, I am doing enough. I am making a step forward. I trust that on the other side of this, it is what is meant to be. I don't get to control that. And when we come in with that real grace for ourselves, it also builds confidence in us in trusting ourselves and building that practice. Um, and I think, let's talk here about some mindset shifts. Really, let's shift from like what's next or what's coming for me. Could we shift that? Could we shift that to what's true for me right now? It kind of takes away that, well, what if this and this and this and this and this and this and this happen? And that's down the road, it never goes that way anyways. I can certainly tell you that, to what is true for me right now. And for me, what's true for me right now is I see this transition of children to adults is it's a transition and it's what's supposed to happen. It's a little bit hard. It's a little bit uncertain, but for right now, I'm honoring it's a shift and it's what's supposed to happen in this journey of life. And maybe, just maybe, I've done okay in parenting to get them this far to this next stage. And then maybe another shift in mindset could be from, am I doing enough? Not everything actually requires us to do more. maybe we shift from the question of, am I doing enough? Could we shift that to, am I honoring where I am? And that comes back to the being, to the becoming, to feeling, to observing. Am I honoring where I am? And that has a there's feel perhaps the softness in that rather than a hustle. Am I honoring where I am today? And, while in transition, I'm just going to, for me, honor. I see where this is going and time is going quickly, but I'm going to honor that how I feel today is okay. And, you know, what do I maybe need? Is there anything I need in this moment for myself to continue honoring just where I am at in that stage? So there's just, a few thoughts around mindset shifts and really again trusting in the process. And we all are whole, we are complete, and we are resourceful. This was taught to us in my Jay Shetty coaching program. And I really, if we look at an individual or we look at ourselves with that lens, we have everything we need. And perhaps if I'm just a little bit curious as to what do I need in honoring, might flip that switch ever so slightly. So let's jump. If you've got your journal or you're going to come back to this, or you just want to sit and consider where you're at today, here's a little prompt for you. So, what chapter are you stepping into, and what do you want to feel like? What do you want it to feel like? What chapter are you stepping into, and what do you want it to feel like? Feel even just as you ask that question in that next stage, it's kind of exciting because it's kind of like, again, honoring where I'm at. I'm putting into practice and I'm observing and I'm listening. And then I'm actually going to put to either words or to pen to paper. Um, what do I want it to feel like? Because I do have the one thing I actually can. I don't really like the word control, but the one thing I actually can choose is how I behave, how I want to feel, and what I ask for. I get to decide that. I can't decide that for anybody else. So I would love to hear your answers on this one. Even just asking yourself the question, how does it make you feel? And if you feel like it's something you could share, please share on social media. Tag me at my hashtag my next arc or the hashtag ARC HIVE. And I'd love to hear what's coming up for you. What is that? What's this next? Are you in a season of change and transition? How does it feel? And if you know somebody who is in their own season of transition and it's unfolding for them, I'd love for you to share this with them and help us spread the word, because together we can facilitate so much change, so many more options, and learning from each other is where we all truly grow. So, thank you so much for being part of the archive today. I hope this episode has left you feeling inspired, connected, and reminded that you are never alone on this journey. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your takeaways and tag me at arc.hive.podcast, and let's keep this hive buzzing. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and invite someone you care about to join us. Until next time, keep honoring your arc, leaning into the hive, showing up for yourself and your community, because together we are stronger. This is the Archive Podcast, and we'll see you soon.